Hello there guys, RMP792 here again. So, yesterday I talked about Starship Troopers the book, and today I'm going to talk about the film. I'll talk about all the films in one regard or another, but I'll be focusing mainly on this one. I friggin' love this movie. I have no idea what it is about it that makes me love it so much, because yeah, I'll freely admit it's got a lot of problems. The acting's kind of shonky in a lot of places. Its tone is kind of wildly all over the place, but it's such a good film. This is kind of Verhoeven really bringing his A game. If you're not aware, Paul Verhoeven basically has what's known as the Verhoeven triptych, which is basically 3 films that he made over the course of about 4 or 5 years. And those 3 films are all sort of science fiction, they're all very satirical, and they're all very good. And those are RoboCop, Total Recall, and Starship Troopers. And this one is easily my favourite. I can acknowledge that RoboCop is the better film. Total Recall has an awful lot of really good stuff in it, but this one, I don't know what it is about Starship Troopers that I love so much. Because, as I say, it's arguably got a lot of stuff wrong with it. You know, the acting is kind of shonky because when they were casting it, they deliberately cast, you know, sort of hip, young, up-and-coming 90s actors as the various parts. You know, I could conceivably have seen a version of this where we ended up with Freddie Prinze Jr. as Johnny Rico. You know, and let's be honest, Denise Richards has never been a good actress. You know, she was pretty terrible in The World Is Not Enough. She's really not that good here. In particular, the scene near the end, which always makes me giggle hilariously, is in one scene towards the end, she gets impaled through the shoulder. And then in the immediate following scene, she casually puts her arms around 2 people. Well, not in any kind of, you know, I need support because I've been wounded kind of way, but more in a friendly, oh, it's great to be back together. She's completely forgotten that she's meant to be wounded, in spite of the makeup people and the costume people doing their best to remind her with this giant-ass blood stain on her arm. So yeah, it's a very silly film, and that's kind of why I like it. Because tonally wise, it's very, very different from the book. You know, this is much more satirical. You know, the book's fairly straight-laced, fairly, you know, fairly serious. This is a goofy-ass movie. You know, right down to the constant vignettes of, you know, the world and, you know, showing the Federal News Network. You know, and, you know, when you've got sequences like, a murderer was captured today and tried this afternoon, and it just cuts to this guy going, guilty. Sentence, death, to be carried out tonight. All net, all channels. Side note, I'm pretty sure that was that the cinematographer or something? Short note, the murderer is played by one of the sort of prominent crew members, which is, yeah, that's fun. But, no, it's a very, very silly movie. But the things that do buoy it up is A, it is fun. B, the performances from the more veteran actors are actually pretty good. You know, Michael Ironside, Clancy Brown, that guy who was Big Jim Rennie on Under the Dome. He was also Walter White's brother-in-law in Breaking Bad. That guy, I can't remember the actor's name. He's pretty good. You know, and they're all kind of meant to be further up the military chain. And, you know, whereas the young actors are kind of doing their best and just not quite getting there. I mean, the best of them is probably Diana... what the hell is her name? The actress who plays Dizzy, who has since gone on to primarily be a voice actress. And, you know, she's even been in a couple of things that I've reviewed. She was in Ancient Space. But anyway, you know, she's probably the best of the young actors. Actually, no, that's a lie. Neil Patrick Harris is in this movie, and he's great. If you haven't seen it before, or you've forgotten it, Neil Patrick Harris plays Carl. And again, Carl is a very minor part in the book. Carl's impetus in the story is to basically be there, say, I'm going to join up, be the first one of Rico's classmates who's definitively certain he's going to join up. He ends up getting onto this research station and then you learn like halfway through the book that it's been destroyed and Carl has been killed. That's all he does in the book. In the film, he's much more important because, he basically said, he's applied to join the research division, and he actually ends up getting assigned to games and theory, which is basically military intelligence. And, by the end of the film, he is a colonel, I think it is, in spite of the fact he still looks like Neil Patrick Harris when he was like 20. So, sorry, something in my eye. But because the whole point is he's got some limited psychic abilities, which are, again, there is a person in the book who is implied to have possibly psychic abilities, though in the book Rico comments that he's not sure if maybe it's just some sort of really, really good hearing. So in the book it's very vague. In the film it's flat out psychic abilities. There's even a wonderful little advert which is just do you think you might be psychic? Well, maybe you are. Then this third eye appears in the guy's forehead, and the adverts are and the little vignettes of the Federation News Network are arguably the best bits of this movie. But there is a lot of really, really good fun stuff. And Neil Patrick Harris's uniform sort of subtly getting more and more Nazi as you go on, because it does basically call out the fact that the state is pretty fascist in the book, and takes the piss out of it, because that was always Verhoeven's style, and it works. I have to really admit that, because at this point, when this film was made, we were pretty sure Nazis were pretty much gone for good, and it was safe to take the piss out of them. Last few days have proved that, unfortunately, we apparently haven't got them beat for good, but hey, they lost once, they'll lose again. Anyway, moving on from the politics. No, it's a really good, fun movie. With that said, there are scenes in it that do kind of annoy me, namely anything that involves the infantry combat, which is kind of dumb, given that it's a film largely about infantry combat, but especially the initial invasion of Clan Dathu, I spent half of it yelling, "Stop doing that, idiots!" Especially because in the film, the bugs are a lot stupider, or they're less technologically advanced would be the best way to describe it. In the book, they've got sort of built-in bio laser gun type things, which are actually quite dangerous at range. Here, the only real range units we see are the tanker bugs, which basically can breathe fire, and the plasma bugs. And the plasma bugs are more like sort of long-range artillery. You get into medium distance or getting close, and they can't do crap about you other than try and step on you. The plasma bugs are primarily used for shooting down starships. Don't think that would evolve naturally, but anyway. So yes, their tactics are terrible, because when you've got an enemy that's based entirely on melee, whose ability at range is non-existent, and you have guns, which of the following do you think is the smart move? A, form up on a proper firing line, concentrating fire on enemies one at a time to bring them down efficiently. Or B, charge towards them while screaming and randomly shooting at them. Yeah, they go for option 2, because they're idiots. Whereas, of course, option 1 is the sensible one. Also, no armour, no artillery support, and they don't even seem to bother with air support on that initial Clan Dathu drop. They just, immediately drop in the troopers, and an awful lot of them get killed. I mean, the casualty count goes into the thousands, and I'm pretty sure that number actually runs into the millions. But, so yeah, they're idiots. They get smarter in the later battles, because they have the sense to send in the air support, glass the place, and then go in. But again, no armour, no artillery, not enough air support. So they're all idiots, basically. But it's not exactly a good definition of ground warfare, but it's an enjoyable film to watch, and I still maintain it's really interesting with the costume design. And this is something I always like to bring up. Either, and I'm genuinely not sure which came first, either somebody in the design department of this film was a big fan of Warhammer 40k, or somebody in the Warhammer 40k design department was a big fan of this film, because their armour and helmets in particular are dead ringers for Imperial Guard armour. Slap an Imperial Aquila on that helmet, and you've got a guardsman's uniform there. Which, yeah, they're treated basically the same way as the guardsmen are in 40k. They're cannon fodder. They're there to soak up the enemy, kill as many of them as they can, and hopefully maybe some of them will come out of it alive. Except the guard at least have the decency to back up their guardsmen with armour and artillery and air support and everything else. But anyway, I'm assuming that was... I don't know if that was a budgetary restriction or if it was just nobody thought of it while they were making the film. But, yeah, so things they changed from the book. They condensed some stuff. For example, in the book, his teacher who lost an arm and his lieutenant are two different characters. It's Colonel Dufoy, something like that. It's a sort of vaguely Frenchish sounding name. Is his teacher, and his first lieutenant is Lieutenant Raschak. Whereas in the film they condensed them both into Michael Ironside. And side note, continuity error I always bring up. Half of Michael Ironside's arm grows back when he gets his robot arm. Insofar as when you see him initially, his arm is missing from about there. When he's sort of poking people with it in the classroom. And then when you see him later on in the film, his arm's about there where the robotic prosthetic starts. So I'll be charitable and assume they were able to regrow like half his arm and just couldn't be buggered to regrow the rest, or maybe they weren't able to or something, but it's a continuity gaffe. So yes, they combine those two into one character, which is... It's basically fine. They serve similar functions in the story of the book, in that they're all stepping stones on Johnny's path to becoming a better soldier and a better leader. What else? As I say, they kind of made the bugs stupider, but they also made the mobile infantry stupider in order to coincide. So, yeah, the mobile infantry basically turn into morons here. As I said earlier, Clancy Brown is really good as Sergeant Zim. Yeah, platoon leader, career Sergeant Zim. I was having to work through his whole speech in order to make sure I got his name right. But no, Clancy Brown is really good there. Right down to the fact that he basically just keeps beating them up and then yelling, "Medic!" And I really love the bit with Jake Busey where the commentator is, "Sir, what's the point of learning this knife throwing?" And you just push a button and drop a nuke on them. Ceasefire. Put your hand on that wall. At which point he just picks up a knife, throws it into it, and just walks over and goes, "The enemy cannot push a button if you disable his hand." Pulls the knife out. Medic! I mean, those medics must get a lot of work. But, no, it's, and of course, he ends up busting himself down to private in order to get a frontline mission rather than being stuck, back at the training camp because he feels like he has to be on the front lines doing his part in the war. There's other stuff that doesn't really make sense, the bugs throwing an asteroid at Earth. Yeah, okay, fair enough. I'm willing to accept that they can use their plasma fire to knock it out of orbit. I'm dubious they could point it in the right direction over that kind of distance. And I'm really dubious that they could get it to accelerate to FTL speeds, because otherwise it would take centuries to get here. So the idea that, the Mormons pissed them off by going into the arachnid quarantine zone and then... and then they did that. That doesn't really make any sense. But I'm willing to forgive if we assume that that was actually just not quite entirely accurate because the government didn't want to accept the fact that the bugs were actually throwing them from much closer. If we assume that the bugs had, have interstellar flight of some description, which is something that Roughnecks looked at, which I'll be talking about Roughnecks tomorrow. But yeah, it's just a really good, really fun film. And what else? I'm trying to think how much I can talk about without delving into sort of major spoilers. Oh yeah, another thing that doesn't make sense. The bit where the asteroid's tumbling towards, I think it is the Roger Young. And they're waiting till the last second to try and avoid it. Why? Push the button now, get out of its way, and maybe you won't lose the comm tower. But anyway. No. As I say, the film itself has problems. Don't go in expecting some sort of grand masterpiece, but it's fun, it's enjoyable, the effects still hold up. At the time, the dead bug was, because they had a sort of full-size bug that they made to use as a prop. And at the time, that was a sort of pretty large, creation. I mean, it got dwarfed by things like the dead Mumakil from Lord of the Rings, but at the time, it was pretty good. And yeah, it's just a really fun film. I'm always willing to forgive a lot when a film is fun. It's the same way that I really, really like Pacific Rim, even though I freely admit, again, it's got problems. That the line in Pacific Rim about, this Jaeger isn't digital, it's analog, so we won't be affected by its EMP weapon. That doesn't make any sense at all. Given that that thing has to be digital, given the whole, elements of stuff. Anyway, not important. I've got to fix that dialogue with one... Would you like to know the simple solution to that line of dialogue that still makes the film work the way it did? Simple. Everything that's online was shut down by the EMP, but Gypsy was shut down, which means she wasn't affected. If they can get her out there and take it out before it fires that thing again, job done. And they do. That's the simple dialogue fix. That's all you needed there, rather than that whole analog-digital gobblers. But anyway. But no, Starship Troopers. Other point I should mention. If you're a bit squeamish, this is not the movie for you. I first tried to watch this... I can't remember how old I was. A bit too young, and there's a point about 3 minutes in where a guy gets bitten in half by one of the bugs. That's unpleasant to watch, and I basically stopped watching it at that point. I didn't come back to it until several years later, by which point I was old enough that the gore didn't bother me, and I actually saw the satirical comedy side to it. A lot of the gore in this film is very similar to RoboCop, where bits of it are just so over the top that they loop around, that they go from, unpleasant to horrifying and loop around to funny. But a lot of it does just stop at unpleasant and kind of horrifying. The deaths of one particular guy where he basically, gets in too close, gets his leg bitten off by one of them, and then when he's trying to desperately crawl away, he gets grabbed by another one by the leg. Gets grabbed by the arm the second time, and it kind of flings him into a bunch of them, and he gets sort of torn apart, and you can just about hear him screaming over it. That's pretty horrifying. A lot of the time, if you think too closely about what you're watching, you realise quite how horrible it is. But it's still a really good film. Just, if you're not into gore, or you're not... I'm not especially into gore, but I don't mind it if it's got a purpose in it, and if it makes sense in the story. Insofar as I'm not a fan of films like Saw, where the gore is there for the gore's sake. But if you're telling a story about something that's really, really violent, the gore's okay. It's like Game of Thrones, for example. That is really gory, but at the same time, it's there for a purpose. Well, some of the time it's there for shock value. But anyway, I'm not talking about Game of Thrones at the moment. But yeah, very violent, very, very Verhoeven, and ultimately just a really good, really fun film. And I strongly recommend it to people, provided you don't mind a bit of 90s cheese and some fairly spectacular gore. Right, so that's about 20 minutes on Starship Troopers the film. I should talk about the other films. I haven't seen 2. It's supposed to be pretty terrible because, among other things, it's got like 5% of the budget of the original, so it's set like 90% in a bunker and is done more as a sort of horror movie. 3 is supposed to be pretty cheesy, but supposedly it does put the power armor back in, or some form of it anyway. It's more mecha exoskeletons rather than power armor, but so yes, if they were on Netflix, I'd watch them, I'd give them a go, even if they're not supposed to be that good. And I have seen Invasion. Invasion is an animated movie that came out 2-3 years ago, something like that. I know there's another one coming out pretty soon. But it came on Netflix a little while ago and I watched it, and it's fine. It puts the power armor back in to some extent. They've actually got sort of sealed combat armor now, with helmets that don't make any logical sense, because they can come out all the way and then go back all the way and down. No, I don't care. Actually, I do care because I'm a nerd. But anyway, Invasion's basically a story of they go to this. It's basically following this couple of squads as they go to a facility, do a small mission, evac the facility, and then have to go and do another mission on a ship that's gone dark. They don't know what's up with it, so they go in and it turns out it's been taken over by bugs and it's all fighty, and then they get and it's fine. It's not amazing, but it's got some good bits. Its main problem, ultimately, is it's got too many characters, most of whom are cannon fodder, as in, 2 people make it out at the end. Yeah. In terms of, effectively, the new characters it introduces, only 1 makes it out at the end. Other than that, everybody who survives is an established character who already existed, because, Rico turns up, and by this point in the timeline, he's lost an eye somewhere along the way, because he's got this cool eye patch, and he's now General Rico. So he's gone up in the world. Carmen turns up as the captain of a ship, and Carl is still doing his very creepy psycho routine. Trying to actually control the bugs. Yeah, that seems like a bad idea to me, but anyway. But Invasion is a solid, perfectly watchable action, animated movie. It's fine. It's not great, but it's fine. The next one is coming out fairly soon, which is Trader of Mars? It's something of Mars, which looks like the bugs have got to Mars and everything's kind of going to hell. So I'll watch it when it comes on Netflix. I may or may not be good. We'll see. Oh, and also, I forgot to mention the nudity. It's a Paul Verhoeven movie, so there is a pointless shower scene, which apparently the director is in somewhere, because when they were talking about filming this and actually doing it with full top half nudity, the general comment from the actors is, look, why should we do this if you're not willing to? So he did. Yeah. So if you're bothered by that, don't watch it, but it's a really good film. I do strongly recommend it, and that's all I got. Tomorrow I will talk about Roughnecks, which is in many ways the best adaptation of Starship Troopers. But yeah, that's a discussion for tomorrow. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in future vlogs.